Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 86 of B-Road Ballers, and as of course you'll have seen here, we are trying out a new visual style. I tried it out last week with special projects and the response was either neutral or positive. There were no negatives, and that is showing the information, the race information on screen. I have no problem with doing that, so if it gives you guys more visual cues to work with, then that's fine by me, of course. Now, this particular car is a car which I don't recall ever seeing anyone use on any of the Gran Turismo games in particular, but obviously predominantly the ones with online content. And the car in question is a vehicle which I have talked about before on the channel in the Dark series quite a while back, the Toyota WiLL VS. This is an interesting hatchback. It's one which has always kind of intrigued me personally. And in terms of its use, well, as I alluded to just now, you just don't really see people using it or even talking about it. It's not a car that you see in seasonal events, online races, you don't even see it in cruise events, and you see some pretty bad cars in cruise events sometimes. So why doesn't it get used? Is it just one of those cars that tends to be easily overlooked? Because there are definitely some great ones which are overlooked. Or is it just not that great? Well, as I kind of covered to some degree in the Dark series, yes, I would recommend trying out this car, but for those who haven't seen that particular episode, because it is a much older one, what can you expect if you buy this vehicle? Because it's kind of interesting to look at. Personally, it kind of reminds me of a more angular version of something like a Renault Megane. It's got a very interesting, totally unique style, which is apparently styled in the image of a stealth fighter. And you can see that. It's got almost like a Lamborghini Tonne kind of front end, which is pretty cool on a hatchback. The rear end of the car in particular is like nothing else in the game. I personally really like the look of this car, and the only styling cue, which I'm actually not a fan of on this vehicle, is the blind spot on the rear quarter panel of the car, where you just wouldn't be able to see anything if you're, for instance, reversing the car or trying to park it. Obviously on the game you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff, but in real life, that kind of practicality disadvantage is something that would kind of annoy me personally. But on the game, as I said, that is of course not an issue at all. So for the price of just over 20 grand, which is a good start, especially for a decent sized hatchback, regardless of whether it's the most powerful or the fastest or not, you get a 1.8 litre turbo engine. It is front wheel drive, which in the case of this car is kind of a shame, but I'll get into that more in a second. And actually the numbers on this car are really good, probably better than you'd expect them to be. 341 horsepower is not bad at all, 213 foot-pounds of torque is again more than enough for the car to be potentially quite quick. But where the car really starts to put itself on the radar as being potentially a very useful machine is the weight, because this car is very lightweight, probably a lot lighter than you may expect. You'd probably assume that being Japanese it's not going to be overly heavy anyway, but it really isn't. 996 kilos, that's less than a tonne. That is remarkably good for a hatchback of its size, and that's actually rivaling stuff like the Honda DC5 Integra. That's very respectable from a car which people don't really use or talk about at all. And as such, the horsepower per tonne is very impressive, 342. So this is one of the relatively few hatchbacks which does have more horsepower per tonne than power. And considering that the power is 341, that's pretty good. It's quite promising, in fact. But the car is not without its downsides. As I alluded to earlier, I would have personally much preferred this particular car in rear-wheel drive or even all-wheel drive rather than front-wheel drive. And I don't hate front-wheel drive. There are certain cars that it works very well with. But there are others, cars which are not performance-oriented, as this one really isn't, that don't really have the capability of coping with extreme power and torque, and also by definition extreme performance, because they're not designed to be that level of performance car. And this is something which I've touched on the channel before. There are certain vehicles which are, from the get-go, designed to be high-performance cars. They don't necessarily have insane performance, but something like a hot hatch, for instance, although it may not have insane power, it is designed to be fast, it's designed to take corners well, it's designed to potentially be taken around a track, whereas a normal road car isn't designed to fulfill any of those things. So the hot version is by definition a better starting car to work with in terms of tuning. Now with a car like this that's not a performance car, it may have a bit more power in certain forms, like vehicles such as the Citroen C5. Yeah, it's not bad, it's got over 200 horsepower, but it's far from being a performance car. So coping with power is very different to just having power. And although this car does definitely have very impressive numbers on paper, remarkably good in fact in some ways, it just isn't designed to have the kind of performance that a hot hatch is. So unfortunately, although it really is great in terms of upgrade potential, outstanding in fact in some ways, such as weight, it just doesn't have the actual in-practice performance of some cars which may still be heavier or even less powerful. And that's a real shame, because this car definitely has the potential to be an unsung hero, the definition of a sleeper hatch, and a really useful car that you guys could start using and start dominating races with. Unfortunately, that's not really the case. Now that being said, this is not a bad car either. I would definitely recommend giving this car a try. As I said, barely anyone talks about the car, barely anyone gives the car the credit that it deserves for being so potentially good. And although I'm saying that it doesn't have the kind of performance of some other hot hatches, it's not slow either. To be clear, this car can win races, and one of the main reasons why it can is because all of its great numbers, 341 horsepower, 213 pound-feet, 996 kilos, all of that is packaged into a car that only sits, even in fully tuned form, at 485 pp. That is not very high at all, and there are plenty of other hatchbacks with similar numbers that are higher than that. So I definitely recommend giving the Toyota WiLL a try, but don't expect it to dominate everything. But that's it for this pick overall. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.